Hello everybody and welcome back to a brand new video where today we're doing one of, I know is a very popular topic of video, it's time for a top 5. So yeah, seeing as I've finished my marathon or my rewatch of the whole Jon Pertwee era, the third Doctor's era of Doctor Who, it felt like an appropriate moment to look back and try and pick out my top 5 third Doctor stories. Now this really wasn't an easy task, because I'm sure some of you will know this era is probably my favourite era of Doctor Who ever, and there are way more than 5 stories that I think are really, really good in the Jon Pertwee era, but so narrowing it down to just 5 has been a real challenge. But I managed to come up with a list, but there's quite a few in there that I'll come to at some point in this video where I felt like I wish I could have included them. So we start off at number 5 with The Demons.
Jenkins? Yeah. Shut for the wings there. 5 rounds rapid.
The finale to season 8, Jon Pertwee's second season as the Doctor. What for me feels like just the kind of absolute pinnacle of a Doctor Master unit story that we kind of ever got in this era of the show. Of course, this era was so heavily focused around the whole unit idea and concept and organisation and the unit family, when you had the Brigadier Lethbridge Stewart, you had Captain Mike Yates and you had Sergeant Benton, as well as the kind of 3 main regulars along with the Doctor and the Companion in each of those stories. And I feel like The Demons is just where that all just really comes together so perfectly. You get all of them having really good roles in each of the episodes through the story. It's a great and interesting idea around all this sort of satanic stuff and the idea of the devil and demons and things, and it's all just very sort of mysterious, almost horror-like at points, I think, really. And Roger Delgado puts in such an amazing performance as the sort of guys, the satanic guide summoning the demons and the devil and everything, and just he just plays the master, I think, so brilliantly and effectively throughout this story. It's such a great watch. I think the setting works brilliantly as well for this. Films down in Devil's End, the brilliant church look they've got going on there, and just this sort of mysterious, small, spooky town that it's all set in around this big archaeological dig that they're going to be doing, breaking through into some new place, which then sets off and sort of unleashes the demons that are hidden inside and everything. Is such a great idea as well. This whole first episode is so interestingly created and shot and focused around this sort of mysterious archaeological dig and this TV filming of it on the mythological BBC 3 on TV at that point, of course it was, which is just quite a fun moment there as well. And it's just such a fascinating story, I think, that really I found kind of goes through really quickly because it's so good and so packed full of story, and just has the really genuinely kind of scary villain at the end of The Devil, where the Doctor, it feels like, is genuinely scared of him and like doesn't know what to do ultimately at the end of that, I think, which is such a great moment to see, and just, yeah, I think just overall such a fantastic story. So next up at number 4 we have The Green Death.
Hey, Joe. Come and drink a toast to the happy couple, huh?
But that's us.
Aye, so it is. Don't worry, Doctor. I look after us.
Are you ready? You're all ready.
There we are. Would you like a drink, Professor?
Well, now, quiet, everyone. Quiet a moment. Now, well, here's to both.
Yeah, here's to both. For he's a jolly good fellow. They are jolly good.
The finale to Jon Pertwee's 4th season, season 10, so another season finale there. Also Jo Grant's final story as the Companion in Doctor Who as well, played by Katie Manning, of course. And it's just another one of the absolute pinnacles of the unit stories, I think, is the best way of putting it, where it's, of course, set down in the Welsh countryside, and in this nuclear power station that's obviously causing lots of problems and creating this weird radioactive waste, which is causing these giant maggots and lots of problems there. And it's just, I think, a story that's just packed full of, well, there's obviously some very interesting sort of pollution thoughts and messages and stuff in here, which I think is fairly clear, but also doesn't completely ruin the story, for example, that some other stories have had in the part, or maybe in the future of the show from that point of view. But it's just a story that I feel like is, again, really exciting. The real scale of it, the setting is just phenomenal, and I feel like it's just such a well-crafted episode, a really good story, really setting up the whole set up for Jo leaving, obviously meeting Professor Jones during the story as well, and how that all sort of plays out, and the kind of dynamic between the two of them that builds through the 6-parter before the exceptionally emotional leaving scene for her final scene that really is probably the most emotional Classic Who Companion departure we've ever seen, really. I think that really is the absolute pinnacle there, and it's so fantastically done like that. And just the villain of the boss as well, I think, is such an excellent villain, this evil supercomputer that kind of is thinking for itself and just gets driven a little bit mad by everything at the end as the Doctor Doctor obviously comes around to defeat him, but just the interesting kind of feeling through the story that you're not really quite sure who the real villain is. You think it's Stevens, for the first sort of 2 or 3 episodes, and then this mysterious boss is introduced, and it just kind of adds that extra layer of it that actually the villain isn't quite who we thought, and there's somebody bigger and higher up in there, and it is this room-filling supercomputer that's actually running the scene, and I think that's just a great villain to have in Doctor Who and works so well. Now, next up at number 3, we actually do have another season finale. It's the finale to season 7, Inferno.
Outside. We've got a firing squad waiting for you.
You idiot, if I don't repair this computer, you'll be...
Are you coming with me quietly? Or do I shoot you here and now?
Which is another one of my probably all-time favourite stories, I would say. One of the very first examples of Doctor Who exploring a parallel and alternative universe. So we start off, of course, in this Earth-based drilling centre where they're drilling down to the Earth's core, basically, to try and extract power and energy from it, or something I think is along the lines of what they want to do with Professor Stahlman, this mysterious professor who's so determined and dedicated to his work. But then very quickly we end up with the Doctor accidentally sending himself into a parallel universe where everything's a little bit different. It's a sort of communist state, basically, with the brigade leader, the brigadier becoming the brigade leader, and Liz being some military general as well. It's just this bizarre and crazy or parallel vibe and worlds where we actually see the whole scenario play out ahead of time. And so we're able to, for once, actually show the consequences of what's going to happen and see the genuine end of the world, where the whole world is overcome by molten lava, basically, and that's it, they're all going to die, and that's the end of it. And certainly it's quite a bold and bleak thing for Doctor Who to do, really, I think, but it's just a really good opportunity to be able to fully explore what will happen, because so often you have to stop the countdown with 5 seconds to go before anything bad actually happens because we can't destroy the real Earth. But to be able to explore that in this alternative one, I think is just such an effective piece of storytelling. Yes, to an extent it just pads out the story, but I think it works so well and so effectively, and it's such this interesting slight twists and takes on the characters that we know and love in the parallel world is such an interesting way of doing it, and then just mixing it in with scenes in the normal Earth as well as the sort of the production of the drilling progresses at different stages is a really interesting parallel. And the Primords, yes, they're not the greatest makeup in the world, but they also are quite weird and interesting, kind of crazy sort of primeval villains that are trying to attack and kill everybody as well, that sort of come out of nowhere a little bit or are infected by this mysterious ooze. It just feels like there's lots of elements in there that really create such a fantastic story. So coming in at number 2, we have the Sea Devils. The third story from season 9 of Doctor Who, the third season for the John Pertwee Doctor. A story set, of course, on the sort of coast, on the shores, under the sea, with all the sea devils hidden down underwater. Fantastic and interesting story. In some degree, playing on the similar sort of idea that we explored in the Doctor Who and the Silurians, with this whole moral dilemma of we were here before you, it's our planet, we want it back type thing. But then chucking in the Master and setting it at sea, I think just adds that extra element to it to make it such a exciting and action-packed story. Again, it's very much one of those peak unit action-packed stories that we always see with the Doctor fighting off the Sea Devils. The iconic shot of the Sea Devils coming out of the water is just so thrilling and exciting to see, I think. The whole relationship with the Doctor and the Master is so interestingly explored in this story as well, where we see the Doctor going to visit the Master in prison and just realising that actually he does care about him quite a lot. That sort of initial character development between the two of them is really interestingly explored in this story as well, which I think is quite fascinating. Of course, it's interesting because this story doesn't utilise UNIT at all. It very much uses the Royal Navy and using real people from the Royal Navy at the time to tell this story and be the sort of army force of this story rather than normal UNIT soldiers, which I quite like. It's quite a nice sort of change up in that regard, I think, and means we get more opportunity to kind of explore out on sea and in these sort of Navy barracks and things like that. It just means you can really use the locations and the settings that you really want to in this story, I think, which works really, really well. And so we're about to come to number 1, but I feel like I should give you guys a few honourable mentions first. As I said at the start of this video, I think there's 26 stories in the John Pertwee era, and there's probably, I've chosen 5 for a top 5, but I could probably easily have squeezed another 10 into that top 5, quite frankly. Like stories like Spearhead from Space, stories like Doctor Who and the Silurians, stories like The Mind of Evil, stories like Day of the Daleks maybe, but certainly Frontier in Space, The Three Doctors, Carnival of Monsters. There's so many brilliant stories throughout the John Pertwee era. It's just so hard to kind of narrow it down. Even the Time Warrior as well. It's just absolutely full of them. I think maybe by season 11 is probably the weakest season, where you've got the Time Warrior, which is really good. Invasion Dinosaurs is not so great. then Death to Dallas is not very good. The Peladon story is not that great either. And Planet of the Spiders, which is okay, but it's also not that great. That's probably the one weaker link in the Jon Pertwee era compared to the rest of it that just is so full of brilliant stories. But of course, you'll probably have noticed there's one I haven't mentioned. Now, this may come as a bit of a surprise to many. It's not necessarily a first choice for most people, but for me, it's a story I've always loved. I think I've seen it several times now, and it's just a story that's always really got me absolutely hooked on it and excited and intrigued to watch it. And it is, of course, The Ambassadors of Death.
Sir James.
So what can I say about The Ambassadors of Death? It's a 7-part epic from the third story from season 7 of Doctor Who. It focuses on the sort of exploration into space and these mysterious missing astronauts that go up into space and then disappear from out of nowhere. The whole mystery and intrigue surrounding that. These mysterious astronauts who come back but aren't actually the real astronauts. There's so much sort of espionage and this deception throughout this story. It's so interesting and mysterious. You don't know who are the good people and the bad people. Suddenly people who have seemingly been good for 4 episodes turn around with a gun and are going to shoot you now, and it's like, what? Where did this come from? You've got some brilliant action and fight scenes with UNIT as well involved in this. It really is a properly action-orientated story, which is so exciting to watch. Yes, there are points where maybe it slows down a little bit and struggles a little bit, particularly with the whole mess of a writing process behind this, where there were like 3 or 4 or 5 writers, I think, involved at different points in trying to create this story. But it's a story that I just find really does race through as very exciting and interesting. When you eventually get the Doctor going up into space, finally finding, I think it's episode 5 or 6, the original missing astronauts, and they're safe and well there and meeting this mysterious alien being or race of some description and trying to find... We don't never really know who they are fully, but it's just such an exciting moment when we get to that, I think, by that point, and then the Doctor having to come back to Earth and try and stop while everybody else is trying to stop him from getting back and providing the information there, he's trying to fight through and do that, and it's just a story, as I say, action-packed, full of excitement, full of intrigue and interest, and deception, and I don't know, it's just a story that's always really clicked for me, and that's why it is my favourite story of the Jon Pertwee era. So yes, there we go, guys. Do let me know in the comments below your top 5 Third Doctor stories. I'd love to hear them. Have you got any of the stories I've got on the list, or have you got a completely different list? I'd love to hear them down in the comments below. But I hope you guys have enjoyed this video, and do let me know if you'd like me to do any other sort of top 5 or top 10 or ranking videos of any sort. If there's any particular ones, do let me know down in the comments below. I'm going to try and start doing a few more of these sort of videos, because I know you guys want to see them. But as always, guys, hit that like button, that subscribe button, and I'll see you again very soon for a brand new video. Goodbye.